My name is Morgan, I'm 29, and my mother-in-law tried to publicly humiliate me by banning me from her anniversary dinner at the fanciest restaurant in the city. Before I tell you how I ended up with the best seat in the house while she was left speechless, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It started, as it always did, with a phone call that sounded sweet on the surface but was laced with poison. My mother-in-law, Diane, was planning her 40th wedding anniversary dinner. "It's at Lumiere," she'd said, her voice dripping with significance. "The only place to be seen these days." I knew Lumiere. And I knew this was a test. On the drive over, I could feel the tension radiating from my husband, Ethan. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice tight. Mom's in full-on performance mode. I managed a weak smile. When is she not? Is it going to be about my sensible shoes or my charming little job this time? He winced, because he knew it was true. We shared a look, a silent language developed over 5 years of navigating his family. We both remembered last Christmas, when she gifted me a cheap apron while everyone else got designer scarves. Or the year before, when she'd accidentally mailed our invitation to the family's charity gala 2 days after it happened. Each event was a tiny paper cut, designed to bleed me out slowly, to remind me that I, the girl from a middle-class background who'd met her son in a state college library, did not belong. "I swear, Morgan, I'll talk to her tonight," Ethan said, his voice earnest. "This has to stop." I placed my hand over his. "I know you will," I said softly. "But tonight, just let me handle it." He looked at me, confused but trusting, and nodded. We walked in, and the place was breathtaking. Low lights, the gentle clinking of crystal, hushed conversations. And there, by a perfectly set table for 4, stood Diane, Harold, and Ethan's brother. Diane was wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than my car, a smug little smile playing on her lips. I saw the maitre d' approach, a man with a stiff posture and a dismissive air. He scanned his tablet. "I have a reservation for 4 Hale." Diane stepped forward, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by the surrounding tables. "Yes. My husband, my sons, and myself." She turned to me, her smile widening into a weapon. "Oh, Morgan," she said, feigning surprise. "There must have been a misunderstanding. There isn't a seat for you." She looked me up and down. "Maybe a budget place down the street suits you better." The words hung in the air, thick and ugly. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. The quiet chatter around us seemed to dim, and I could feel eyes on me. It was a public execution. Harold, my father-in-law, suddenly found the pattern on the carpet fascinating. Ethan's face was a thundercloud. I saw him start to rise from his chair, a protest forming on his lips. And I did something that surprised even myself. I met his gaze across the room and gave the slightest, tiniest shake of my head. A silent message. "Let me." He froze, then slowly, reluctantly, sat back down. Then, I laughed. It wasn't a hysterical laugh, but a clear, bright sound of genuine amusement. It startled Diane more than any tears or angry words could have. I turned my back on her perfectly set table, on her small, petty victory. I looked past them all, my eyes landing on a man standing near the bar, looking stressed and surveying the room. The owner. James. As I started walking toward him, I didn't feel shame or humiliation. I felt a cold, hard clarity. This game she had been playing for years? It was over. Tonight, I was burning the whole board down. Every step I took toward James felt like a drumbeat. As I walked, it was like a movie montage in my head. That exposed brick wall everyone was Instagramming? My idea. The soft, golden lighting that made everyone look like a movie star? Pulled directly from my spec sheet. The exclusive, impossible-to-book chef's table tucked away in the corner for the ultimate private dining experience? My signature concept. A year ago, Lumiere was a dying relic. It had a stuffy menu, terrible reviews, and was hemorrhaging money. James had been desperate. He'd been introduced to me, a scrappy young restaurant consultant, as a last-ditch effort. He'd taken a huge risk on my vision. I wasn't a guest in this restaurant. I was its architect. And as I approached James, I wasn't asking for a favor. I was coming home. James saw me and his entire demeanor changed. The stress on his face melted away, replaced by a massive, genuine smile of relief. "Morgan," he exclaimed, rushing forward to give me a brief hug. "Thank God you're here." "Tell me honestly," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "this new chandelier is too much, right?" I told them you'd say it was too much. He was speaking to me not as a guest, but as his most trusted advisor. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Diane and Harold approaching, her face a mask of confusion. She was losing control of her own narrative, and it was killing her. "James, what a lovely surprise," Diane said, trying to regain her footing. "I'd like to introduce you to Morgan, my son's wife." James gave her a polite, professional nod, then turned his full, beaming attention back to me. "Oh, I know Diane," he said, his voice warm and clear. "But to us here at Lumiere, she's Ms. Hale. The woman who saved this restaurant." The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Diane's jaw literally dropped. Harold looked like he'd seen a ghost. James, oblivious or perhaps pretending to be, gestured to the now panicked maitre d'. "Pierre," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "Prepare the chef's table for Ms. Hale and her husband. Immediately. And open that bottle of 98 Bordeaux she loves. Her table is always complimentary, you know that." He turned back to me. "The best table in the house is always for the person who designed it." Ethan was by my side in an instant. He didn't say a word. He just slipped his hand into mine, a silent, powerful statement. As the maitre d', now pale and sweating, led us past my mother-in-law's table, I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at her. I just looked at my husband, and for the first time in a long time, we were both breathing freely. The next day, the phone rang. It was Ethan. "I told them," he said, his voice firm in a way I hadn't heard before when it came to his parents. "I told them they will come to our house. Today. And they will apologize." He wasn't asking for my permission, he was informing me of a decision he had made for us, for our future. He was no longer a bystander. He was my partner. An hour later, they were sitting in our living room. My territory. The power dynamic had been completely inverted. There was no fancy restaurant, no audience, no silk dress. It was just them, on my couch, looking small and out of place. Harold mumbled a clumsy apology first, something about a misunderstanding. I just nodded. Then there was a long, uncomfortable silence. Diane wouldn't look at me. She just stared at an old photograph on our mantelpiece. "My mother," she began, her voice brittle, "was a waitress her whole life. She cleaned the tables of people like, well, people like us now. I promised myself I would never, ever let my children know what it felt like to be looked down on." It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession, pulled from a place of deep, ancient shame. She wasn't just a monster, she was a scared woman who had turned her fear into a weapon and aimed it at me, because she saw her own past in my humble beginnings. I took a deep breath. The anger I had held onto for so long finally began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet resolve. "I understand your fear, Diane," I said, my voice steady. "But you used that fear to hurt me. To make me feel small so you could feel big. And what happened last night, that was the last time. From this day forward, you will respect me. You will respect our marriage. Or you won't be in our lives. The choice is yours." Things didn't magically get better overnight. There was no tearful hug. But something had fundamentally shifted. A few months later, Ethan and I were popping a bottle of champagne in our kitchen. My consulting firm had just been featured in a major business magazine. We were celebrating, just the two of us, happy and content in our own world. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a text from a number I almost didn't recognize. It was Diane. The text contained only a link to the article about me. Below it, a few awkwardly typed words. Your father and I read this. Congratulations. It wasn't an I love you. It wasn't an I'm sorry. But it was something. It was an acknowledgement. It was a single, fragile brick being laid for a new bridge. I showed the phone to Ethan, and he smiled. And that's the story of how I stopped fighting for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I realized I never needed their approval. I just needed to own my own value. My power wasn't in getting them to like me, it was in knowing that I didn't need them to. That night, sitting in our quiet living room, I looked at a simple, beautiful ceramic bowl on our coffee table. I'd bought it from a local artist for $20. It was understated, authentic, and it belonged here, in my house, a house built on my own terms. And I finally understood what true freedom felt like. Thank you guys so much for listening to my story. It was a long and painful journey, but I came out stronger on the other side. My question for you is, have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up to family to protect your own peace and your own worth? Let me know your story down in the comments, I'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more. It really helps the channel out. I'll see you in the next one.